And this is a Python write a program type of question, sort of thing that will be in paper 1 for you. So let's have a look at this one. It's 5 marks. It should be fairly straightforward for 5 marks, I think. So the program has to get the user to input an email address and then get them to input it a second time. So all we're going to be doing here is really entering 2 email addresses and doing the comparison. But let's do the first bit first. I think it's always better on these just to do it as we go along. So we need an input. So let's call it mail1 equals input. And if you want to say something in there, you can. Enter mail address. But you don't have to put anything in those brackets if you don't want to. Mail 2 seems to make sense. Input enter mail again. And so we did the first bit there. So those 2 bits we've done. So we need to output the message match and output the email address if the email address entered are the same. So we're going to need an if statement. So if we called it mail1, so if mail1 equals mail2. And just while you're doing this, just don't put spaces in here. There's a tiny space there, but it's don't put spaces in your variable names. You'll definitely lose marks if you've got obvious spaces in there. So if mail1 equal to mail2, and we need a colon at the end of there, then let's do a printout. Says we're supposed to print match and output the email address as well. So just do them separately. So we're going to output one of it, doesn't matter which one because they're both the same. So we'll output mail1, doesn't matter. And then output the message do not match if they're not the same. So if these are not the same, we're going to have an else. So else would just print do not match, it says, doesn't it? Do not match. Okay, so that was a really straightforward program, I think, for our 5 marks. So how do we get those 5 marks? Well, there are 2 marks, I think, available for design. So design marks. And they are for having meaningful variable names. So let's say good variable names. And that's, they mean something. So mail1 and mail2 seems reasonable for this because they're both email addresses. So that should be absolutely fine for those. The second design mark is for using selection. And we've used selection using our if and our else statement. So we get mark A and mark B for those. And then there are 3 marks for having the correct program logic. So the first one is for having 2 variables to store the input in. So that will be C. D for a correct expression that checks if they're equal, or you could check for not equal, but I prefer to check for equal where we can. And for outputting do not match and match in a logically separate place, i.e. in 2 areas. So that's E. And then the mark scheme says max 4 if any errors. So that's going to be the same on almost all of these kind of programming things. You're only going to get, not going to get all the marks if you've made some errors. So just be careful as you write the idea of your code. Try and write simple variable names that don't have any spaces. So you don't have to put something in the input box, but make sure you've got the right brackets there. Make sure you've got the correct indents. So these are indented correctly, lined up. The paper will have some lines to help you do that, but if you choose not to use those, then make sure that you've lined it up properly and there's no ambiguity, there's no mistaking what you've done, and you'll be absolutely fine. So that's a 5-mark question. Very simple program to write.